A heavy hand slammed down on the table, rattling the silverware and making the candle flame dance. "Hey, pal." A voice slurred with arrogance. A young man, Jax Ryder, loomed over the corner booth, a drunken smirk plastered on his face. He was trying to impress his finance bro friends by picking on the quiet, older man with the salt and pepper beard. "Think you're too good for the rest of us," he snarled. But the man he was targeting wasn't just some senior citizen, until Jax decided to shove him. Before I show you exactly what happened next, and how this martial arts master responded, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Now let's get into it. The evening at the Crimson Oak Steakhouse had started with a low hum of civilized conversation. The Crimson Oak was the kind of place that smelled of success and seared beef. Dark wood paneling, deep leather booths, and the soft glow of low-hanging lights created an intimate, expensive atmosphere. The air was filled with the civilized clinking of glasses and the sizzle of prime cuts hitting hot plates. It was a sanctuary for the city's well-to-do, a place where deals were closed and anniversaries were celebrated in hushed tones. But tonight, a discordant note was being played at the bar. His name was Jax Ryder, a man whose ego was as inflated as the market bubble he profited from. Fresh off a massive bonus at his fintech firm, he was holding court with a sycophantic crew of junior analysts, his voice a braying trumpet of self-congratulation. "And then I told him, you either meet my number or I walk," Jax boasted, his overpriced watch glinting as he gesticulated wildly. Guy folded in 5 minutes. It's all about leverage, boys. Knowing who's the predator and who's the prey. His friends laughed, their adulation fueling his arrogance. His eyes, swimming in a whiskey haze, scanned the room for his next target, his next opportunity to assert dominance. They landed on a corner booth, where a solitary figure sat with an aura of profound calm. The man was Steven Seagal. At 60, his iconic black hair, now tied back in a neat ponytail, was streaked with gray. A meticulously trimmed salt and pepper goatee framed a face that was a mask of placid neutrality. Dressed in a simple but elegant black silk shirt, he was methodically working his way through a medium-rare ribeye and a tall glass of iced tea. He was an island of tranquility in the restaurant's gentle current, a fact that seemed to personally offend Jax Ryder. To Jax, quietness was weakness. Stillness was a challenge. He saw an easy mark, a chance to put on a show. "Check out this old-timer," Jax muttered to his friends, loud enough for half the bar to hear. "Probably still thinks $1 is worth $1. Let's go wake him up." Ignoring the hesitant warnings from one of his colleagues, Jax swaggered over, his expensive shoes clicking in arrogant rhythm on the oak floor. The confrontation began exactly as described. The slam on the table, the sneering question. Steven Seagal finished chewing a piece of steak, his movements unhurried. He slowly raised his eyes, dark and piercing, and met Jax's gaze. There was no fear in them, no anger, just a deep, analytical calm. "I'm just enjoying my dinner," he said, his voice a low, gravelly baritone. The simplicity of the response infuriated Jax. He needed a reaction, a spark to ignite his manufactured drama. "Enjoying your dinner?" Jax mimicked in a high-pitched voice. "Maybe you should learn some manners first, old man." He leaned in closer, his breath sour with whiskey. "This is my town, my place. You show some respect." Seagal's expression remained unchanged. "Walk away," he advised, the 2 words delivered with the finality of a closing door. For Jax, this was the ultimate insult. He wasn't being feared, he was being dismissed. Pride, fragile and alcohol-soaked, shattered. "Oh, I'll walk away," he spat, "right after I teach you a lesson." And with that, he shoved Seagal's shoulder. It wasn't a gentle push, it was a violent, jarring shove meant to rock the older man in his seat. The restaurant's hum died instantly. Forks froze. All eyes snapped to the corner booth. But Steven Seagal didn't move. Not an inch. His powerful frame absorbed the impact as if it were a raindrop. His eyes, however, sharpened. The predator Jax thought he was hunting had just revealed himself. A collective gasp swept through the Crimson Oak. Jax stood there, his hands still extended from the shove, a triumphant sneer on his face. He expected the older man to flinch, to cower, maybe to protest. He got nothing. Seagal remained as still as a mountain, his gaze locked onto Jax with an unnerving intensity. "You don't want to do this," Seagal repeated, his voice dangerously soft. The smirk on Jax's face widened. "Oh, I really think I do." He balled his hand into a fist and swung a clumsy, telegraphed right hook aimed at Seagal's head. It was the kind of punch that might work in a bar brawl against another drunk, but it was laughably slow, utterly predictable. It never landed. In a movement so fluid and swift it seemed to defy physics, Seagal's left hand shot up. It didn't block the punch. It intercepted it, catching Jax's wrist in midair. The impact was a dead stop. Jax felt as if he had punched a steel I-beam. A jolt of pain and pure shock shot up his arm. Seagal's grip wasn't crushing, yet held Jax's wrist in a vice of immovable strength. Panic began to flicker behind Jax's eyes as he tried to yank his arm back. It didn't budge. He was caught, helpless. The crowd watched, mesmerized. Phones were already out, recording the silent, tense drama. Seagal leaned forward just slightly, his voice a whisper meant only for Jax. "You just made a very serious mistake." And in that whisper, Jax heard the cold, hard truth. This was no ordinary old man. Humiliation burned hotter than the whiskey in his veins. Jax, snarling, tried to use his free hand to grab Seagal's shirt. It was a fatal error. In one seamless motion, Seagal applied a subtle, downward pressure on Jax's trapped wrist. It was a classic Aikido wrist lock, Kotegeshi. The biomechanics were perfect and inescapable. A spike of excruciating pain shot through Jax's arm, forcing an involuntary grunt from his lips. His knees buckled, and he was driven down to the floor, landing hard on the polished wood. The arrogant finance bro was now kneeling before the man he had just tried to bully. The restaurant was a sea of wide eyes and open mouths. Jax scrambled back to his feet, his face a mask of crimson fury. The public shaming was more than his ego could bear. He wasn't thinking anymore. He was pure, blind rage. His eyes darted around, looking for a weapon, an equalizer. They found one. On a nearby table, where a couple sat frozen in terror, was a steak knife. With a guttural yell, Jax lunged for the table and snatched the blade. The woman screamed. The clatter of the knife being grabbed was like a gunshot in the dead silent room. He brandished the weapon, its serrated edge catching the candlelight. "Let's see how tough you are now," he screamed, his voice cracking. Slowly, deliberately, Steven Seagal rose from his booth. He rose to his full, imposing height, his presence filling the space. The calm on his face never wavered. "Put the knife down," he said, his voice imbued with a chilling authority. But Jax was beyond reason. He charged, knife held forward in a clumsy, desperate stab. Time seemed to slow. Seagal's body moved with an economy of motion that was breathtaking. A simple sidestep took him out of the blade's path. As Jax stumbled past, Seagal's hand moved again. It wasn't a grab this time. The edge of his palm, hardened by decades of training, struck Jax's forearm on a precise pressure point. A sharp, numbing shock pulsed through Jax's nerves. His fingers went limp, and the steak knife clattered harmlessly to the floor. Before Jax could even register what had happened, Seagal spun him around, locking his arm painfully behind his back and slamming his chest onto the table he'd just robbed. Dishes rattled violently. "Second lesson," Seagal said, his voice calm and clear for the entire restaurant to hear. "Any weapon you introduce into a conflict can, and will, be used against you." He applied just enough pressure to elicit a pained gasp, then released him. Jax collapsed into a heap on the floor, clutching his arm, utterly defeated. Seagal calmly picked up the knife, wiped it with a napkin, placed it back on the couple's table with a slight nod of apology, and returned to his booth. He sat down and picked up his glass of iced tea as if nothing had happened. The immediate aftermath was surreal. Jax Ryder lay on the floor for a moment, a pathetic heap of shattered pride and expensive clothing. His friends at the bar, who had been his cheering section just minutes before, now looked everywhere but at him. One of them nervously paid their tab, and they scurried out of the restaurant, abandoning their leader without a second glance. The silence in the Crimson Oak was broken by a smattering of hesitant applause, which quickly grew into a wave of relieved admiration. Jax staggered to his feet, his face pale with a mixture of pain and mortification. He shot Seagal one last look of pure, undiluted hatred, then stumbled out of the restaurant, slamming the door behind him. The show was over, or so everyone thought. The restaurant's atmosphere shifted from terror to exhilaration. A buzz of excited chatter filled the room. "Did you see that?" someone whispered. "He didn't even break a sweat." Phones were no longer just recording, they were now uploading. The captions were already being written. "Drunk bro picks fight with the wrong guy. Real-life action hero in steakhouse." The waitress, a young woman named Chloe with wide, astonished eyes, cautiously approached Seagal's table. "Sir, are you all right?" "That was incredible." Seagal offered her a faint, reassuring smile. "I'm fine. Could I get a little more ice for my tea?" His complete and utter lack of agitation was almost as stunning as the fight itself. He radiated a preternatural calm, but his eyes were not entirely at rest. While he resumed his meal, his gaze would subtly sweep across the room, his senses on high alert. He was a master not only of combat, but of human nature. He knew that an ego like Jax Ryder's, once so publicly shattered, doesn't just heal. It festers. It seeks revenge, often in the most stupid and predictable ways. Seagal knew this wasn't the end. Humiliated men rarely stay gone for long. They often return with friends, fueled by a desperate need to reclaim their lost honor. 20 minutes passed. The restaurant slowly settled back into a semblance of normalcy. Diners were still talking about what they'd witnessed, replaying the videos on their phones with a sense of disbelief. Chloe brought Seagal his refilled tea, her hand still shaking slightly. He thanked her kindly and took a slow sip. He had finished his steak and was enjoying the lingering peace. He was aware of the exact moment the energy by the entrance shifted. The main door didn't just open. It burst inward, slamming against the wall with a deafening bang that silenced every conversation for the second time that night. Every head snapped towards the entrance. There stood Jax Ryder, his face contorted with rage. But this time, he wasn't alone. Flanking him were three other men. Two were the broad-shouldered types from his group at the bar, their faces flushed with drink and a desire for payback. The third was a new addition, a heavier-set man with a shaved head and cold, dead eyes that screamed trouble. All four of them looked drunk, angry, and incredibly reckless. "There he is," Jax snarled, pointing a trembling finger at Seagal's booth. "That's the old man who thinks he can make a fool out of me." The crowd gasped. People instinctively shrank back in their seats. The manager fumbled for his phone to call the police, but everyone knew they wouldn't arrive in time. The storm Seagal had been anticipating had arrived. Steven Seagal placed his glass of tea down on the table with deliberate care. He didn't flinch, he didn't even look surprised. The four men began to spread out, attempting a clumsy encirclement of his booth. Their movements were sloppy, their aggression fueled by cheap courage from bottle. One of Jax's friends, the one with the shaved head, stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. "You got a problem with our boy," he growled. "Let's see you handle four of us, Grandpa." Slowly, Seagal pushed himself up, unfolding to his full height. His large frame seemed to absorb the light in the room, casting a long, intimidating shadow over the approaching men. He calmly adjusted the sleeves of his silk shirt. His expression was unreadable, as placid as a deep lake before a storm. "I told you once," Seagal said, his voice now like cold steel, cutting through the tension. "Walk away." For a moment, his sheer presence gave them pause. But Jax's pride was a bonfire that demanded to be fed. "Not this time," he screamed and lunged forward, throwing another wild, looping punch. What followed was not a brawl. It was a masterclass in controlled chaos. Seagal moved. With a swift, almost lazy-looking parry, he deflected Jax's punch, using the man's own forward momentum to spin him off balance. As Jax stumbled past, Seagal delivered a short, sharp strike with the heel of his palm to the center of Jax's chest. The impact wasn't brutal, but it was perfectly placed. Jax staggered back 5 feet, crashing into an empty table with a clatter of scattered plates and silverware. The second man charged, a beer bottle he brought in with him raised high. Seagal sidestepped the clumsy swing, his hand darting out to seize the man's wrist and elbow simultaneously. He applied a quick, wrenching joint lock. The man yelped in pain, his fingers spasming open as the bottle shattered harmlessly on the floor. Seagal then used the man's own body weight, guiding his trajectory to hurl him over his hip. The man landed with a heavy thud that rattled the windows. The heavy-set friend with the shaved head rushed in next, lowering his shoulder for a football-style tackle. It was a move designed to overpower an opponent through sheer mass. Against a master of leverage and balance, it was tactical suicide. Seagal planted his stance, absorbed the initial impact, and in a single fluid motion, caught the man's collar and shoulder. Pivoting with effortless grace, he sent the man flipping head over heels, landing flat on his back with a groan that signaled his fight was over. The crowd, which had been frozen in fear, erupted. It started with a single cheer, then grew into a roar of support. Jax, scrambling to his feet amidst the wreckage of the table, was apoplectic with rage. "Get him!" he screamed at his last conscious friend. But it was far too late. The man swung wildly, a desperate flurry of punches that met nothing but air. Seagal deflected each blow with minimal effort, then struck with a single, precise knife-hand chop to the man's ribs and swept his legs out from under him. He hit the ground hard, clutching his side. Finally, there was only Jax. Desperate and utterly reckless, he grabbed a heavy wooden chair and raised it over his head, roaring in fury. Seagal didn't break stride. With one hand, he met the chair mid-swing, his grip like iron. He yanked it from Jax's grasp and tossed it aside as if it were a toy. His other hand shot forward in a lightning-fast strike to a nerve cluster in Jax's shoulder. Jax's entire arm went numb, and he dropped to his knees, gasping, his eyes wide with a final, crushing disbelief. Seagal stood over him, a towering figure of absolute control. His voice was steady, but filled with a finality that echoed through the now-silent restaurant. "This is the last lesson. It's called respect. You don't demand it, and you can't buy it. You earn it. Learn it. Or next time, you won't get up." His friends lay groaning on the floor. The four of them, battered and broken, staggered to their feet one by one and limped out of the restaurant in a parade of shame. As the doors swung shut, the entire restaurant erupted into a standing ovation. This story wasn't just about a fight in a restaurant. It was a perfect demonstration of a universal truth. True strength isn't found in loud threats or aggressive posturing. It's forged in discipline, control, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing exactly who you are. The clash wasn't between an old man and a young bully, but between hollow arrogance and the unshakable foundation of true mastery. It's a reminder that the most dangerous person in the room is often the one who doesn't need to prove it. Have you ever encountered someone who mistook quietness for weakness, only to be completely surprised? What would you have thought if you were sitting in that restaurant watching this unfold? And do you think real, profound strength ever needs to announce itself? Or is its power found in its silence? We want to hear your thoughts and your own stories in the comments below. Let's discuss this, but please remember to be respectful to each other. If this story reminded you that true confidence is quiet and that respect is earned, not taken, then hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about legends hiding in plain sight. Share this with someone who appreciates the art of peaceful strength and the wisdom of experience. We read every single comment, and your perspective is what builds this community. More stories about unexpected heroes and masters of their craft are waiting for you right on your screen. Click on one of those next, and we'll see you tomorrow with another incredible true story that you won't want to miss.